They say intuition is a woman's sixth sense, but that night it felt more like a scream clawing at the inside of my chest. The clock read 9:17 p.m. My husband, Brandon, had texted me an hour earlier. Meeting ran late, visiting a client now. Don't wait up. But something felt off. His tone was too casual, too rehearsed. And the strangest part? Brandon never told me not to wait up. He relished coming home to me, to our perfectly curated life. At least, that's what I used to believe. I sat on the edge of our bed, phone clutched in my hand, heart thudding so loud I thought it might crack my ribs. I wasn't a jealous wife. I wasn't the kind to snoop or nag. But I wasn't stupid either. The way he had been coming home late more often, the way he guarded his phone like it held nuclear secrets, the distant look in his eyes when I asked about his day, it had all started adding up. I just didn't want to do the math. Until that night. Curiosity gave way to suspicion, then quickly turned into a pulsing need to know. So I opened the tracking app we'd installed on our phones years ago, back when we both thought transparency was romantic. He said it was for safety. Funny how safety turned into surveillance. I zoomed in. He wasn't at a client's office. He was parked in front of her apartment. Her name was Kristen. I'd met her once. Blonde, too young, too flirty. She worked at his firm in marketing. Just an intern. At least that's what he said. Now she was apparently worth risking a marriage, a mortgage, and a life built over 8 years. My stomach dropped. I could taste bile, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I sat there and watched his little GPS dot stay perfectly still for 43 minutes. Then, I watched it move down the street. His route home, no doubt rehearsing the lies he'd feed me like stale bread. And then I watched him lie. He walked in just after 10:15, wearing that calm, polished mask he always wore after a long day. I asked him how the client meeting went. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Tough case, but we're close to closing the deal." His voice didn't shake. His eyes didn't flicker. That was when the real betrayal hit me. Not just that he was cheating, but that he had perfected the art of lying to my face. Like I was nothing more than a piece of furniture in his carefully constructed life. I went through the motions. I nodded. I even asked what he wanted for dinner the next night. And he had the audacity to say, "Surprise me." That night, as he showered, I sat in the walk-in closet, knees pulled to my chest, and let the tears fall silently. My mind spun between heartbreak and rage, sorrow and strategy. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, but I also couldn't let this go quietly. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was war declared in whispers and shadows. And if he thought I was just going to lie down and play the heartbroken wife while he carried on with his affair, he didn't know me at all. Because I was about to become the woman he wished he'd never lied to. And the best part? I wouldn't even have to raise my voice to destroy everything he thought he could get away with. The next morning, Brandon kissed me goodbye like nothing had changed. His lies were seamless, like silk spun from years of deception. I stood at the kitchen sink, watching his taillights disappear down the street, the taste of black coffee bitter in my mouth. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something. But I didn't. Not yet. I knew now that this wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't some impulsive office fling. No, this had been calculated, quiet, methodical. And the more I looked back, the more I saw it, the trail of crumbs he'd left, thinking I'd never piece them together. It was in the way he started dressing better, switching colognes without explanation. It was in the late-night work trips that always came with vague details and no receipts. It was in the way he changed his phone password for security and suddenly became more possessive of it than his own shadow. What stung most wasn't just the cheating. It was how easy it had become for him to erase me. We had built a life together. 8 years of shared holidays, home projects, inside jokes that only made sense to us. I had been his anchor, his emotional crutch, his cheerleader through every career move. I helped him land his promotion. I edited his damn presentations. And now he was spending nights with a woman who probably didn't even know how he took his coffee. I started paying attention to the details I had brushed off before. I noticed the extra wine charges on our credit card from places I'd never been to. I saw the way his texts were always cleared by the time he got home. His phone buzzed more frequently now, but he never checked it in front of me. He'd just glance at it, flip it over, and say, "Nothing important." nothing important. Apparently, I was nothing important. I checked our joint savings account. That's when my breath caught in my throat. Thousands. Slowly drained over. The last 4 months. Withdrawals timed perfectly with his client dinners and out-of-town conferences. I checked hotel bookings under his name. Multiple matches, some just a city over, some under aliases, but all traced back to his business card. He had been funding their affair with our money. I was living with a stranger. No, worse. I was funding his double life while he looked me in the eye and called it love. I remember staring at the screen, blinking hard, willing the numbers to change. They didn't. But something in me did. I stopped feeling broken. I stopped questioning myself. This wasn't my failure, it was his rot, finally surfacing after years of me patching up the cracks. But the damage was real. Financially, emotionally, even professionally, Brandon had used me. He'd leaned on my stability so he could go build a fantasy life on the side. If I confronted him now, he'd just lie again, gaslight me, maybe even turn it around and say I was overreacting. No, that's what he was expecting. He thought I was predictable, passive, that I'd cry, scream, and then forgive him because that's what good wives did. But I wasn't a good wife anymore. I was a woman with nothing left to lose, and a front row seat to his destruction. He had written the first chapter in lies. I was going to write the rest in truth. Painful, undeniable, and publicly documented truth. He didn't know it yet, but the moment I saw that dot on the GPS was the moment his carefully spun world started to unravel. And I was going to be the one pulling every thread loose. At first, I told myself this was just about the affair, about betrayal, about making him feel the sting of what he'd done. But as the hours passed, I realized it was deeper than that, far more dangerous. Brandon hadn't just cheated on me. He had gambled with my future. You see, we weren't just married. We were financially entangled. Our assets were shared. My name was on the mortgage, the credit cards, the retirement plans. We'd even discussed starting a family next year. And through it all, I had trusted him blindly to manage the numbers, because he knew business and I didn't want to micromanage. But now I saw what that trust had cost me. I met with my best friend Renee, a family lawyer, under the pretense of grabbing coffee. But halfway through our lattes, I told her everything. The GPS location, the strange withdrawals, the hotel bookings. Her expression changed. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She said, "We need to protect you right now." That's when the gravity of it all hit me. Brandon wasn't just emotionally detaching. He was preparing his escape route, slowly siphoning our shared money, redirecting deposits to new accounts, building a financial cushion for his new life while leaving me in the dark. If I hadn't caught on when I did, I might have woken up one day to a drained bank account, a mortgage in default, and no legal claim to what I'd helped build. It wasn't just a broken heart on the line. It was my home, my stability, my freedom. And Kristen? She wasn't just some young fling. She was working her way up in his firm, and from what Renee discovered after a little digging, she came from a well-connected family. Suddenly, I could see the chessboard. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was a calculated exit plan, a newer model, a shinier image, and I was in the way. I wasn't going to let him erase me like that. Not after I'd put my career on hold to support his. Not after I'd picked up the slack while he traveled. Not after I'd held him through the death of his father, cooked his meals, paid down his student loans, and believed every promise he whispered in the dark. I wasn't going to let him walk into a new life while leaving mine in ashes. That's why it mattered. Because too many women I knew had stories like this. Stories they kept quiet. They forgave. They walked away with nothing because they thought it was the dignified thing to do. But dignity doesn't pay the bills. And it sure as hell doesn't teach someone like Brandon a lesson. This wasn't just about getting revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming power. Making sure he didn't get to leave me behind, broken and broke, while he played house with someone who didn't even know half of who he really was. I looked in the mirror that night, long and hard. My eyes were tired. My heart was sore, but something in me had hardened, steeled itself. This betrayal, it wasn't going to define me. It was going to refine me. I wasn't going to let him win. If Brandon wanted a war, he had just unknowingly declared it on the wrong woman. Because now I wasn't just his wife. I was his reckoning. I didn't confront him right away. That was the hardest part, pretending, smiling, keeping my voice light when I wanted to scream. But I knew if I moved too soon, if I acted on rage, I'd lose my leverage. and I wasn't about to lose anything else. So I started planning. The first step? Information. I created a separate email account and moved all financial documents over: bank statements, credit card activity, insurance policies, investment portfolios. I started checking daily. I learned more in 1 week than I had in the past 8 years. The man I married had woven our finances into a web designed to keep me dependent. Accounts I never knew existed, purchases that didn't match our lifestyle, a pattern of transferring money from our joint savings into his private checking, one I hadn't even known he had. It was all there, hiding in plain sight. I printed everything, labeled folders, categorized by date. Renee helped me craft a legal timeline, because if this went to court, I'd need evidence. Not tears, not heartbreak. Hard proof. The second step was surveillance. Subtle at first. I tagged along to one of his client dinners by pretending I had errands near the restaurant. I sat across the street watching him through the windshield as he touched her hair, leaned in too close, held her hand. I took photos, not grainy, questionable ones, clear, time-stamped, undeniable. I also started recording, just audio. Nothing illegal, just me, in our home, asking questions like, "Where were you tonight?" Or, "How was the client meeting?" Then capturing his polished lies. I asked about Kristen, too. He claimed she was barely an intern, someone he barely noticed. Perfect. The third step was infiltration. I created a dummy social media account, just enough to pass as a friend of a friend type, and followed Kristen. Her account was locked, but not her friends. And wouldn't you know it, within a week, I found photos. A cozy dinner. Brandon's hand in the frame. A blurry selfie at what looked like a resort spa. Dates lined up exactly with his out-of-town conference. It was more than just an affair. It was a full-blown parallel relationship. The fourth step? Lockdown. I met with a financial advisor and opened my own accounts. Quietly shifted half of what remained in our joint savings into a secure, private account in my name only. Legal, since it was marital property. I pulled copies of our marriage certificate, his pay stubs, our prenup. If he thought I was going to let him blindside me with legal jargon, he had another thing coming. And finally, the trap. I planned a weekend away, told Brandon I was visiting my sister. I made sure he believed I was out of town. And sure enough, he brought Kristen to our home, our bed. What he didn't know was that I had left a nanny cam hidden in the bookshelf. Tiny, unobtrusive, motion activated. It captured everything. Her walking through the door, the wine, the laughter, the way he spoke to her like I never existed. That was the final piece. Now I had a full dossier. Financial fraud, adultery, proof of deception, proof of intent, and enough recordings to make any lawyer salivate. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because Brandon's birthday was coming up, and I had the perfect gift in mind. The truth delivered. In front of all the people who thought he was a loyal husband, a brilliant businessman, a stand-up guy. I wasn't going to ruin him in private. I was going to let him destroy himself, with his own words, his own actions. All I had to do was open the curtain and let the show begin. The plan was in motion, and every day that I played the role of the oblivious, supportive wife, I was one step closer to reclaiming what was mine and dismantling what he thought he could keep hidden forever. Brandon's birthday was the perfect stage. He always made it a spectacle. Invitations to colleagues, friends, even his boss, because appearances mattered to him more than anything. This year, I leaned into that tradition. I booked the rooftop of his favorite restaurant, ordered custom decorations, and sent out digital invitations with a smile. He thought I was being the doting wife again. Really, I was tying a bow on his own undoing. But before that night came, I had work to do, strategic, calculated, and methodical. Step 1. Secure the legal ground. With Renee's guidance, I filed for divorce in secret, quietly, carefully. In our state, adultery was considered a fault-based ground, and given the mountain of evidence I had collected, there would be no he said, she said. I made sure to timestamp everything: hotel receipts, the audio files, the nanny cam footage, the pictures. I also filed a temporary restraining order to freeze our joint accounts. This ensured that once Brandon was served, he couldn't drain our money and run. I wasn't just walking away. I was walking away with my dignity, my finances intact, and a legal net ready to catch every lie he'd try to spin. Step 2. Build. a backup network. I reached out to a few close friends, people who had suspected things but never said anything. Quietly, they began feeding me information. Kristen had been seen driving Brandon's car. Someone had spotted them at an out-of-town spa during what was supposed to be his solo business retreat. One of the junior employees at his firm even overheard them planning a weekend in Mexico. I documented every account, saved screenshots of texts, and built a timeline. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about presenting a version of the truth that couldn't be spun. Step 3. Set the stage. I had the nanny cam footage edited, nothing salacious, just damning enough. A clean 2-minute clip that showed him welcoming her into our home, offering her wine, and saying, "She's out of town, don't worry, this is our weekend now." I loaded it onto a USB, backed it up in the cloud, and emailed a copy to myself under a different alias. Then I wrote a letter. Not a dramatic screed, not a rant, but a calm, direct statement of fact. What he had done, how long it had gone, on how he used our money to fund it, and why I was leaving. Step 4. Public exposure, private control. The night of the birthday party, I dressed in the same red dress he'd once said made me look like I owned the room. That night, I did. The restaurant was full. His boss, coworkers, friends, even Kristen, hovering near the bar, pretending to be just a friend. Everyone toasted him, clapped for him. He was the king of the room, for one last hour. Then, I took the mic. I told him I had a special gift. I handed the USB to the DJ and nodded. The screen behind the bar came to life. It was quiet at first, just laughter, wine glasses clinking. But the second Kristen appeared in the footage, the room shifted. Conversation stopped. His smile disappeared. Then came the line. "She's out of town. Don't worry, this is our weekend now." Gasps, awkward shifting, eyes darting to him. Kristen turned white. He just stood there, frozen. I stepped down, handed him the divorce papers in front of everyone, and walked away without another word. Step 5. Aftermath. He tried calling, texting, even showed up at my door once, but it was too late. I had already spoken to his boss, who, it turned out, had a zero-tolerance policy for affairs within the firm, especially involving subordinates. Kristen was gone within the week. Brandon was asked to resign. I sold the house, kept the savings, restarted my career with a fire I didn't know I still had. Because here's the truth. Karma doesn't always come on its own. Sometimes, you have to become her. The days after the party were silent, but not peaceful. Brandon didn't call for 3 days. I imagined him scrambling, trying to control the damage, spinning lies to Kristen, to his boss, to anyone who would listen. But the narrative had already shifted. His empire of deception had collapsed under the weight of truth, and I hadn't even needed to scream. When he finally showed up at my doorstep, he looked like a ghost of the man I once loved. Tired, unshaven, the arrogance wiped clean from his face. "I just want to talk," he said, voice low, careful. He stood on the porch like a stranger, a man begging for a moment of grace. I opened the door just wide enough to look him in the eye. "Talk?" I said. "Now you want to talk?" He nodded. "I made a mistake. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I didn't think you'd find out like that." Like that. As if the public humiliation had been the problem, not the betrayal, not the months of lies, not the way he had used me like a stepping stone to someone he thought was shinier. I let him talk for exactly 3 minutes. He cried. He begged. Said Kristen had meant nothing, that he was confused, that he missed me. I listened with the stillness of someone who no longer felt anything. He tried to step inside. That's when I said it. "I'm not your home anymore. Brandon, that door? It's closed. You chose her, and then you lied to my face every single day. I don't care if she meant something or not. You meant something to me, and you threw it away." He left that day with no parting words, just silence. But I didn't feel empty. I felt whole, for the first time in months. You see, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about reclamation. I didn't ruin Brandon. He ruined himself. I just stopped protecting him from the consequences. The months that followed, I rebuilt my life, one steady step at a time. I started therapy, not to understand him, but to understand why I had stayed silent for so long. I learned to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. I stopped blaming myself for his choices. I got my old job back, and then some. When word got out about how I handled the situation, calm, composed, meticulous, I was offered a consulting gig, helping women navigate similar financial and legal entanglements during separation. I turned my pain into purpose. The community I thought I'd lose actually rallied around me. Friends who had once been distant reached out. Women I barely knew messaged me to say thank you for being the voice they were too afraid to use. Even Renee, who'd been through her own quiet divorce years earlier, told me, "You did what most of us only dream of doing. You didn't just walk away. You walked through it with your head high and his mask in your hand." Brandon? Last I heard, he moved into a small apartment in the city. His firm's silent buyout didn't make headlines, but everyone in his circle knew why he was gone. Kristen tried to salvage her internship, but left the industry within weeks. He reached out once through email, a long apology. I read the first line and deleted it. Closure wasn't something I needed from him anymore. I had created my own. Here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't destroy you. It exposes the parts of you that needed light. I wasn't just the wife he cheated on. I was the woman who took the blow and built something stronger from the rubble. I was the calm hand that uncovered his chaos, the quiet voice that turned into a roar he never saw coming. I didn't just survive him. I outgrew him. So to the woman reading this, maybe sitting in silence, heart twisted in doubt, wondering, if your instincts are wrong, trust yourself, document everything, stay smart, stay calm, and when the time comes, don't just get even, get everything.